Ross is our speaker this morning, and Terry's a graduate of Ballard Memorial High School and West Kentucky Community and Technical College. And she worked for 17 years at Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant for USEC and some other agencies, cleanup contractors. And now she's employed part-time at FDR Honda and Kawasaki in motorcycle parts and accessory sales. Terri also happens to be my sister. And so in 2003, she had a life-changing event, and she had a motorcycle accident, and I was I got a call saying she had a motorcycle wreck and that she was at the hospital with a broken leg. So I went up there, and it turned out it was much worse than a broken leg, and she was flown to Vanderbilt. The next morning at Vanderbilt, I was sitting there in the waiting room while she was in surgery, and they called for the Ross family, and I happened to answer the phone, and they told us that she'd lost her leg. So I was the first person to find that out, that she'd lost her leg, and had to tell the rest of the family. But a lot of things have happened since then, and a lot of good things, and it's changed Terry's life in a completely different way. And so she started the amputee support group here in Paducah, and has done lots of things to help people since this accident happened. So I'm going to turn it over to Terri.
Thanks.
Yeah, now I got you.
As my sister Marilyn said, I lost my leg a little over 7 years ago, and it did change our whole family's life. I was a workaholic mom, and I spent a lot of time working at the plant, and since then it did change our whole family's life. It changed everyone's life. I had a 9-year-old daughter, I had a 15-year-old daughter, and it went from I worked all the time, and that just put me on a total stop. I was unable to do anything at that time. I was not able to drive. I sat in the house for long 8 months. I did not leave the house without someone taking me. And when you come to a total stop like that, it is devastating for someone. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself and how my accident happened, and just let you become familiar with how this affects you and your whole family. And I'll tell you just how everything came to be and how I came to be up here standing here in front of you. So as Marilyn said, I had the accident. I had the accident here in Paducah. It was a nice Friday night, and we just went for a little ride. And I didn't know anything until the next Thursday or the next Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, until they woke me up from a drug-induced coma. And the next thing I know, my husband had told me that I lost my leg, and that was basically all I knew until they told me that they were also going to wire my jaw together. And I did know that I did not want that done, but they did it to me anyway. And there's not much you can do about it when you're tied down and you're on life support. And that was the one thing I did remember that I did not want done. But when I lost my leg, I was really confused and overwhelmed about all the terms that they were slinging at me. They were saying, okay, you're now an AK amputee, and you're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing rehab, you're going to be doing all these things. I got an information pack from the Amputee Coalition of America, and I didn't realize it. I didn't realize I got that information pack. I didn't know what to do with it. I was sick. I was on so many medications. I was just really in this zone, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't really look at it. It was just something that somebody passed along to me. They thought it would be helpful for me. And it was a long time before I ever even thought to look at it. I didn't know any amputees. I didn't know anyone to speak to about what I was going through. There was no support groups. There was no one to help me. And I was alone in this world. And so as I started going to therapy, and as I started going to doctor's appointments, I would see a lot of amputees sitting in the offices. And I finally thought, hey, I'm one of these people, so I think I could speak to them. I think I could say hello. I'm kind of now a member of the club, so to speak. And I started saying hello to other people. I would see these people probably 2 or 3 times a week. It seems like we always fell in the same doctor's appointment range. And I started saying hello. And I started asking them questions, you know, do you feel like this, or does this hurt you? Do you still feel that leg? And so I started asking a lot of questions, and I spent about 3 weeks at Vanderbilt, in Vanderbilt Stallworth Rehab Hospital. Then I transferred back to Lourdes Hospital. And then when I got out of the hospital at Lourdes, they gave me a handicap tag application. And I said that was the biggest blow to my self-esteem that I had ever had in my life. It was like, me, I'm handicapped. I could not believe it. That was like a kick in the gut to me. And I thought, okay, this is my goal. I'm gonna get over being handicapped. I did not want that label of being disabled. And so I just kind of watched that expiration date on that tag, and I thought, okay, by the time this tag expired, I'll be over this. I will absolutely be better. I will never have to have a handicap tag again. But it didn't work out that way. So I had a lot of setbacks, had a lot of surgeries. I wasn't even fitted for a leg for 8 months. I was tied down in that house. My mom took me everywhere I had to go. I had to apply for disability against my will. My insurance company forced me to apply for it. And they took me to the Disability Social Security office. My mom drove me up there. I had one leg, no prosthetic. I was crying when I went up there, and they said, "Oh, you don't qualify." So, just it's not easy to do like that and feel like that. So I sat home for 13 months, and I finally returned to work a few hours a week on a walker, and I was absolutely exhausted when I got home. And you start to feel like a failure. It's very depressing, and I did seek therapy. I went to a counselor. And one of the best things I ever learned at that counseling was you love your limbs. You love your limbs like you love a family member. And if you don't grieve your loss, you will regret not going to counseling. So I highly recommend anybody with losing a limb to go to counseling. And when I was going to my physiatrist appointments, my physiatrist noticed that I was reaching out to other people. And whenever I started reaching out to other people and talking to the other people, he said, would you be interested in starting a support group? We really need a support group in the Paducah area. And he didn't ask me at first if I would just be willing to start the support group. He just said, I noticed that you are talking to other people and reaching out, and he finally asked me if I would visit a lady that was up on the rehab floor. He said, this lady is having a lot of problems adjusting to the loss of her limb. And I said, yes, I would go up there and visit her. And the very first lady I visited, this was this lady, and I visited her, and she cried, and I felt so terrible when I went up there and visited her. But he said, go up there and visit her when she's in the physical therapy department. And I went up and I found out who she was, and she was a very nice older lady, and she was so kind. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with how Lourdes holds the clinic, and they offer the physical therapist to come in, the prosthetist come in, the rehab physician comes in. And it's free, so everyone can go up there and just meet kind of in the hallway and get all that good free advice if you've just lost a limb, all in one room. And we were sitting out there waiting for clinic to begin, and this lady and her daughter were sitting out in the hall, and they said, does anyone know who might have come to visit my mother? And they said something about maybe starting a support group. And I was afraid to raise my hand and say that was me because I'd made her cry. And I kind of looked around at everyone else, and I said, that was me. And she said, well, we're so excited. We're so excited to have a support group in town, and we will be there. We will absolutely be there. And so that did make me feel good that I had said, yes, I will be there. And she said that, yes, they would be there. And I said, well, I'm so happy, to start rounding up people to start a support group. And it took me about a year, but I did get a small support group started. And we're still a small support group, But we help individuals. We've gone through people with before they've lost their limbs and as they lose their limbs, and some people we just visit once or twice and we'll see them and we may call and check up on them again. And each person, at least we know we've touched them and we've done what we can for them. Whether they come back again or not, we know we've made a difference in their life. So we've started this and we've stuck with it for the last 5 years. And my process introduced me to the Amputee Coalition of America, and I've become a member of the coalition, and I've also attended the national conference for the past 2 years in Atlanta, and people come together all across the United States to attend this conference. There's people from Canada, I've met people from Poland. Other countries don't have the prosthetic devices that we have there here in the United States. They attend training and become certified to start support groups and to do different things. Sometimes they get together just to swim, to dance, to play tennis and learn to run again for the first time after they've experienced amputation. And it's all done in a non-judgmental environment where they feel comfortable again, and maybe they can go out and face the world again comfortably for the first time after they've lost limbs. And when you join a support group, you're around people who truly understand how you feel. Your friends and family always gather around you and they tell you that they feel sorry for you, they comfort you, and they truly try to understand. But when you're around a peer, someone who has gone through it the same as you have, they are the only people who can understand. They're the only person that can say, I know how it feels to have that pain, that emotional loss. I know how it feels when I reach down and I want to scratch that foot and it's not there. I know how it feels when I want to go out shopping and I can't find any shoes. I know how it feels to have to buy 2 pairs of the same ugly shoes because I can only buy a pair of shoes that's set at a certain height because there's nothing else that fits. And it's just aggravating, and you can dump on someone else who's in the same boat as you are. And if your foot hurts and it's not there, you know, you can't explain that to your brother or sister. You can only explain that to someone else who's dealing with the same situation. And if you've had a good day, that person in that peer group, that support group, is always going to understand exactly what you've meant. And if you've had a little triumph, we're so happy for you too, because if we've had a triumph, we really want to share that with you, and we want you to share that with us. We're always there if you've had a good day, we're there if you've had a bad day, and we want to celebrate it, and we're always there if you had just any sort of problem, and we call each other, we let each other know what's going on in our lives, and we celebrate every milestone for someone. And when I first lost my leg, I thought I lost my ability to do a whole lot of things. I had a little pity party one day, I guess I was home alone, and I took a little piece of paper and I wrote down all the things that I thought I'd never be able to do again. And I wrote down things that I really didn't do, but I always thought that I might want to do. My sister-in-law has horses that go walk back and forth between our house, and that was one of the things I wrote down. I'll never be able to ride a horse again. It wasn't that I rode horses a lot. And I wrote down that I'd never go swimming again. I'd never be able to walk on the beach. I'd never drive my car again. And it was just all these things that I wrote down. And I kept that little piece of paper. It was just a little bitty yellow piece of paper, and I still have it. And I'm happy to say that I have marked off everything on that list. So I have challenged myself probably more now that I have become an amputee to do all the things that I wanted to do. And I've even learned to snorkel. And I found out it's much easier to take your leg off when you snorkel because it fills full of water, and then you almost drown yourself sometimes. So the ocean grabs a lot of water. I've driven a car with a clutch. I always could drive a car with a clutch, but I was afraid to try that. So I got in some go-karts that you had to drive two-footed in an amusement park, and I said, hey, I might have to be pulled over, so I'm just going to tell you, I don't know if I can do this. And they said, okay, don't worry about it. Just raise your hand if you need to be pulled off the track. Well, I'm very competitive, and I won the race. So I bumped a few cars. There was a girl and boy in front of me, and they were just flirting and fooling around, so I hit them a couple of times, and I finished the race in first. And I just love to do things like that. And I went snorkeling in Florida one year, and I went snorkeling in the Dominican Republic last fall and out in the middle of the ocean. So that was a little scary, but I tried it, and I knew I had my friends around me. And I have ridden those horses. I rode them with the Girl Scouts, and my leg did come off. I hit the button to release it, and I've learned to laugh about those things. I mean, that's the only way you can handle it. And when you end up with something like this, you can laugh or cry, and it's a whole lot easier to laugh. And when I first went back to Girl Scouts, the very first night I went back with my leg, I told the Girl Scout troop leader, I said, just everybody come over here and just check out my leg. And we just had a little show and tell, a 5-minute show and tell, and then I was not interested anymore. I was just Kelsey's mom again. And so when I go places like the water park, I have kids come up to me and they inspect me and look at me, and one little boy told me that my foot was not real, and I told him, yes, I did know that, I understood that. And little boys are always more curious than little girls. A lot of kids ask me about it, and they just love to check me out. And whenever I do speaking engagements and I go to the class, especially like the physical therapy assistance class, I always try to emphasize to the PTA students that all amputees are not the same. There are always different levels of people, and everybody does not have the same goal when they are ready to go home. I was 39 when I lost my leg, and I had kids at home, and I wanted to go back to work. Now, if a person is 70 years old, usually their goal is to go back home, maybe get a leg and work around their kitchen, go outside and get the mail. And I ask them to please evaluate what the situation is. Don't say, okay, well, this person can do a leg lift on the left, they can do a leg lift on the right, they can do a leg lift on their back, and they do leg lift on the front, so they are rehabilitated. That is not rehabilitation to me. I had intentions of going back to work. I needed to be able to get up and go. I needed to do a whole lot of things. I wanted to go back and be a Girl Scout mom. I wanted to work. I needed to teach my daughter how to drive. I had one ready to get her driver's license, and I wanted to go shopping. I wanted to be a mom again. I wanted to be a working mom again, and that was my goal. That was what I had in mind. So I always beg them to please evaluate the person. Don't just classify us all as an amputee. So depending on your overall health and your situation, that's what you need to look at whenever you have someone. And that's also true for just any sort of disability, is just however you're gonna end up in life overall, whatever your disability is, there's always an overall goal when you're doing rehab. And whenever I visit new amputees in the hospital, I try to explain the terminology that they use and what they're hearing the physical therapists and doctors say. And whenever I visit them, I always go in and I explain what they're hearing from the doctors, because that was one of the scariest parts to me, is I didn't know what they were saying. They were talking about me, not to me. And so I try to come in and sit down with them and ask them, are you hearing that you're an AK and you're a BK, and you're going to get a shrinker? And I do a little show and tell. I offer them magazines and publications from the Amputee Coalition, and we also have all these magazines that I mentioned at our booth out here. And the hospital gives them a copy, Lourdes Hospital gives them a copy of stuff. That's usually where, even if you go to Western Baptist, you're probably going to end up at Lourdes because they have the bigger rehab. But they always end up with a copy of all these magazines and publications when they go home from the rehab. And it's very nice that the social worker at Lourdes does call us if the patient wants a visit. And when we walk in and introduce ourselves and explain some things, I try to do a show and tell with my leg. If weather permitting, I usually wear shorts in. If I'm not wearing shorts, when I come in and introduce myself and the patient asks me to walk around a little bit before I leave, and they'll say, "I didn't realize you were an amputee." That's a great compliment to me. It's a great compliment to the physical therapist in the area. I worked hard to get more physical therapy than normal. I didn't just say, "Okay, I'm done," whenever they said, "You're done with your physical therapy." I asked for more physical therapy. I begged for more physical therapy because I wanted more than just the standard amount of physical therapy, because I wanted to do as much as I could do to do as well as I've done. But whenever that patient says, I had no idea you're an amputee, would you walk around just a little bit more? It gives them hope. It gives them hope to let them know that it is possible to do more and be more than you ever had any idea that they would be able to do as an amputee laying in that bed. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about disability etiquette. Individuals with disability are people. They're not the disability. So whenever you meet a person with a disability, it doesn't mean they're disabled. They're always a person first. And when you meet someone in a wheelchair, always speak to the person. And if you're going to carry on a conversation for a couple of minutes, if I'm going to come up to you, for example, and I'm going to speak to you, I'm going to speak to you.
Yes, thank you.
And if I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes, I'm going to come up to you and I'm going to sit down with you where I can talk to you and be polite. And I'm not going to touch your wheelchair because that's your personal space. When I was in a wheelchair for a long time, I did not like anyone to push me around. And I bet you don't like anyone to push you around.
I try real hard to do it. I'm not in a wheelchair much of the time. When I go places, I'm on a walker.
Right. But when you travel long distances,
You have to have a wheelchair.
you have to have a wheelchair. And if you need assistance, you probably would like some assistance if you go a long distance, correct?
Yes, and I ask my friends to help.
Right. But if you're looking at something in the store,
I have been shopping.
okay, but if you're looking at something in the store, you don't want someone to push you around because then you can't look at it.
That's right.
And that's your personal space. And I understand that very much. When I went on a trip with my daughter's Girl Scout troop, we went to a museum in Chicago, and I didn't see much of the museum because they were trying to be very helpful and polite as being Girl Scouts. And every time I came up to something I might want to look at, someone would say, "Miss Terry, would you like me to push you?" And off I went. And people don't realize that they think they're being helpful. Now, if we were in the street and we were going, 2 or 3 blocks, it was great to have a little help. But when you're inside somewhere and you're just rolling around a little bit and you're moving yourself around, it's very hard. And it's a violation. It's just a little bit of a violation. If they say, "I'll just move you over here because I know you probably want to go," you might not necessarily want to go. Always ask. And don't lean on someone's wheelchair. Don't move them. Don't rock them. It's really aggravating. And my husband was the world's worst, I have to tell you. So it's just a personal violation. If you meet someone that has an artificial arm, go ahead and stick your hand out to shake their hand. And it's okay to shake left-handed. If they're missing their right arm, go ahead, offer the gesture. They won't be offended. they know they're missing the arm. So it's just okay. And if you say something to someone, and I'm wearing shorts a lot, and someone says, you know, I gotta run, or, you know, any of those phrases, they're common everyday phrases, they are not offensive. And I am not offended by any of the terms residual limb, stump, anything like that. If you're polite, those terms are very user friendly. So it's just general manners is what all you have to do. And anyone with a service dog, they're working dogs. They're not to be petted, even if they are not labeled as a service dog. If you can tell they're working animals, they're all business. And someone with a speech impediment, just ask to repeat the question. If you have asked them a question, just ask them to repeat the answer. Those are perfectly fine things to do. And I also use a wheelchair almost every evening. I still have a lot of knee, leg problems, and I can't walk a lot, so that's just one of the things that irritates me is being moved around. I don't like to be moved around at all. If you have someone with a hearing disability, don't shout. A lot of people can read lips. If they need you to speak up, they will ask you. Someone with a visual disability, identify yourself and say that I'm here, and if you have another person with you, please introduce that person and say they are on my left. And mental illness is treatable. Mental illness does not mean you're mentally retarded. People with mental illness, 1 in 5 people have mental illness. Very treatable. And some of the guidelines for disability versus handicap. A disability is a condition caused by such things as accident, trauma, disease, or genetics. A handicap is a constraint imposed upon a person regardless of that person's ability or disability. A handicap would be if we're in a wheelchair and you come up on a curb and there's no exit down, or a set of stairs and there's no elevator. So that would be a handicap for a person with a disability. And always use correct terminology. A person with an epilepsy is the correct terminology. Don't say an epileptic. I know we've learned a lot watching television shows, such as a person wants to be called a little person. They don't want to be called a dwarf or a midget. That's incorrect terminology. And a person with a disability does not want to be called a cripple. And so I think in the handout you'll see all these terms, so we don't have to go over all of these. And employment, if any of you do hiring on your jobs, there are written descriptions identifying the essential functions. Have written job descriptions. Never ask a person with if a person has a disability or an employment interview. Don't assume a person's disabled. If they're disabled, that he'll be better suited for certain jobs. It's amazing what people can do. A lot of jobs are easily adapted for people with disabilities, and sometimes easily accommodated for people who have disabilities. Just a little place between steps, a little strip between steps, would make it easily accessible for someone in a wheelchair between the steps and the door, or just a rail on the steps, just some little, or a rubber mat to make it easily where you could stand there. So there's lots of things that you can do to make it easy for people with disabilities to work at your place of business. and I want to talk a little bit about the Amputee Coalition. The Amputee Coalition, the mission of the Amputee Coalition is to reach out to people with limb loss and empower them through education, support, and advocacy. The Amputee Coalition is a nonprofit organization, and they're funded mostly by the Center for Disease Control. They're headquartered in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they have volunteers like myself working all across the United States, and they provide support to amputees across the United States. There's also a branch in Canada, and in 2008 there were approximately 1.7 million people living with limb loss in the United States. Almost 200,000 people a year lose limbs in the United States. By the year 2020, the total number of people living with limb loss is expected to reach 2.7 million. 44% of people living with limb loss are age 64 or older. And the number of people using medical equipment are growing daily. And the Paducah Area Amputees in Action, which I founded here in Paducah 5 years ago, we've been doing a little recycle program of medical equipment by collecting them from people who just don't have anything else to do with them. And I just noticed that there's always medical equipment at yard sales, there's always medical equipment at clothing closets.
So you're talking about like walkers, wheelchairs?
Walkers, wheelchairs, quad canes. I do not collect shower chairs. I collect stuff that I can move quickly back and forth. I work with Lourdes Hospital. I've been working with the school systems. The school systems use the chairs to move, the wheelchairs, the walkers, to move the special needs students. They use them for fire drills, tornado drills, anything, any of the time drills. They also use them for pep rallies and just different things that they want to go to. And they can move the kids. Most of the kids can walk, but when they get a little stressed out, they don't move as quickly. And when they have to get those, you know, they hear those alarms going off, they get a little stressed out. And so they have to get them out quickly, or they want to go to assembly, the pep rallies. They move them from the high school or from the middle school to the high school, or the grade school to the high school. They don't have that in their budget. So I called the school and said, hey, we've got these, would you like to have them? And they were so happy to get them, and they can get the kids over to participate in these events. And I also give them to the hospital, or sometimes people are having trouble getting on disability and it's a year wait. They don't have any way to get to doctor's appointments, they don't have any way to get anywhere. And I just offer them back to at no cost. People are throwing them away. They're taking them to the recycling center and they're crushing them. They're getting, you know, 50 cents or a nickel out of them. So I'm collecting them. I'm just we're just being the hub to get them back into somebody else's hands that needs them. So we're collecting them and recycling them. And say, for example, if Medicare pays for you a power chair, you know, you get nothing else. You don't get a regular wheelchair if you get a power chair. And
No, they won't give you a walker and wheelchair ball.
Right. So you get one or the other. And a lot of times you get home and you find, well, I've got this, but I really need something else. Or if an elderly person lives in a 2-story home, they can walk around downstairs, but if they need to go upstairs, they're not capable of taking themselves up the stairs, holding a walker to get around upstairs. So we'll furnish them that second walker to keep upstairs when they get upstairs. They're not able to move out of their home because all of a sudden they've had a stroke and they need something to get around in their home that they've lived in for 30 or 40 years. So when we find that out, the social worker from Lourdes calls and we provide that for them. So we're just trying to.
Have you done anything from our unit? Have you talked to Mary about that? Does she know that?
I think she knows I'm doing it.
Okay, I think.
I've got something I'd like to say about treatment normal.
Uh-huh.
I've got friends up in West Liberty, Kentucky, and he lost his arm of a hip, the guy that lived on, in a factory. And he had this one that's got a, what do you call it, a hook on it,
Uh-huh.
from up here and around, and this hook comes out. And we had a party that night, and everybody danced with him. I took that hook, and we danced around the floor, and everybody did just like if he had the real arm there.
Well, that's great.
And
No.
it made me feel good to do it.
Yes. Well, he only lost his arm. He's still a human being,
Yeah.
so.
And he liked to dance.
Right. Now, I've seen, there's a man that comes to the national conference, and he's on the back of some of these flyers that I have at my booth, and he's lost all 4 limbs. I don't know how he lost them, but he runs the marathon every year, and he dances at the dance, and he can dance better than most anyone I've ever seen with 2 legs and 2 arms.
He did, but, you know, at first when I seen the others, I wasn't the first one to do it. I thought, oh, but I touched that little crook barrel stuff, you know, and I just had it all.
Yes. So it really works. They really work. So everyone, the people are still the same. You know, I don't feel any differently. Sometimes I look down and I'm still a little shocked, you know, that I don't have my leg, and it's disappointing at times, but there's still life to be lived, and I still have fun, and I've had a lot of good support from family and friends, and I have met so many people that I never would have met, and made a lot of good friends, and that's the way I have to look at it. It's changed my life, but it's changed it for the best. So I'm happy to still be here. And
Well, yeah, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing for Paducah.
Right.
Just what the impact you've had on other people and the services that you started just to do there.
That's right. Right, so I
Blessing. It didn't seem like a blessing at the time, it's a blessing for Paducah.
it is. So it was, I try to make my lemonade, I guess. Thank you. So if you'd like more information on resources to find work for a person with disabilities, you can contact Vocational Rehab. The Goodwill stores also hire part-time employees with disabilities. To apply for disability, you can contact the Social Security Administration. If you need information on the prevention of or amputation, you can contact the Amputee Coalition of America. Support groups are listed, all kinds of support groups are listed in the Lone Oak News and Family and Parenting Magazine, Western Baptist Hospital, and Lourdes Hospital. Mental health, for information on mental health, you can contact Four Rivers Behavioral Health Center. And I thank you for your time today, and please visit our Amputee Coalition of America booth and pick up some of our publications. And does anyone have any questions for me?
Do you have a phone number or contact for the recycle? I mean, is there a number you call to pick up or
Yes.
to drop off?
I run an ad in the Lone Oak News every week, and you can also come out to my booth and I'll give you some information.